parents, the child goes to the teacher who will guide that child.
What do you mean by external moral authority? You use that expression a lot.
Materialism has to do with when you are
Hello, a very warm welcome back to you. For those of you who are just joining us, this is the course in Values and Spirituality. We are almost at the end of book number 1, and today we will be covering the subject of character development. I am here in the studio with Sister Denise, who has been sharing her time and wisdom with us. Sister Denise, welcome back.
Thank you.
In this section, I see that you begin with 3 bullet points, and I will read it for our viewers. This section proposes 3 components considered essential to developing sound character. Number 1 is universal values. Number 2, decision-making ability based on those values. And number 3, willpower. Okay, so I want to go through it one by one, and there are other aspects in the paragraphs which I think we will raise for discussion as well. Would you take us through these 3 bullet points and tell us why you felt it was important as far as character development is concerned?
Your character is really connected with whether or not you are a person of integrity. So integrity is something that we're going to go into in a great deal of depth quite a bit later on in the course, but just to begin with, integrity means that all the different parts of yourself are consistent and coherent with all the other parts. Universal values, which we're also calling spiritual values, are related to and stem from the original qualities of a soul: purity, peace, power, love, bliss. And if you are operating out of that motivation, out of those qualities, that is going to make you a person of integrity, a person who is not selfish, a person who is bearing in mind the laws of karma, and whose action is motivated by good for me, good for you, good for everyone. The next one, decision-making ability based on those values. People are constantly faced with different moral choices throughout the day, at least 2 or 3 times. You have to see what needs to be taken into consideration. You have to understand and quantify for yourself the consequences of different decisions that you make. What is going to happen to you, no doubt, is important. What is the impact on the other people involved, and even the environment and the social structure? So if you make decisions having taken into consideration all of these things, though it may cost you in some areas, but you still have the power to do that and the intelligence to do that. The third one is willpower, and this is one of the big problems, and that is a person will know this is the right thing to do when they don't have the power to go ahead and do it.
Many find themselves in that position.
And that is because usually doing the right thing would cost you too much. It requires a inner strength, inner wealth to actually go ahead and do the right thing. I think people believe doing the right thing is easy. Well, if it was, they'd do it. It's actually easier and cheaper to do the wrong thing in the short term. In the long term, obviously, you get enormous benefit from doing the right thing. But the problem is the short term. And so at the moment of having to make a decision, someone who's not clear, someone who's not honest, they sort of collapse in the face of having to do the right thing when they just can't.
Okay, so I like the way you define character in the next paragraph. It reads, character means moral or ethical strength or integrity. That is a very beautiful working definition of character. I actually want to read the rest of the paragraph, and I'd like you to take us through it. Moral concerns the principles of right and wrong in relation to human action and character. It is in accord with standards of what is right or just in behavior. It also means virtuous. Integrity conveys firm adherence to a standard of values and is synonymous with truthfulness. Take us through all of this, please, in as much detail as you like to.
Your character has to do with, your greatness. There are all kinds of characters in a play or a film, but the character of one who is, the hero, the one that people identify with, relate to, and are drawn to emulate, is the person who embodies what is right. And right means corresponding to those essential qualities that I mentioned earlier on. And you see, a person has their light side, and then they also have the dark side.
Which means their virtuous side and their weaknesses and vices.
When a person is spiritually depleted and weak, their vices are strong. And a person who is motivated by violence and selfishness, greed, etc., the actions they choose to do will cause harm for other people. If you cause harm for other people, you may get a short-term benefit, but the larger world who comes to know about it will not give you blessings, and sooner or later you will have to pay for it, and so that will not look good. You will lose your honor, dignity, and so on. So a person of great character means a person who has the ability to do those things under duress, but which are the honorable, the noble, the beneficial, you see. A person of character is fundamentally philanthropic. A person of character is in their own power. They're not looking for power. They're not hungry. They are full, and they can share that. And this is their royalty.
Well, if you put it like that, I must say it sounds rather attractive. Yeah. You then go on to describe character development, and this means to develop the ability to reason morally, to make moral judgments, and to arrive at decisions on the basis of moral principles. This includes the ability to reason compassionately and lovingly, and to feel and demonstrate sentiments of genuine appreciation or respect. Easier said than done is what I thought when I read this.
Of course, easier said than done. But you see, a person who fills themselves with spiritual strength, the ability to do it comes. Because it's about generosity of spirit. It's about magnanimity. It's about making sure that you do not abuse your power. You may be in a position of power. You have the power of, you can decide what happens to somebody, and you recognize their value, their intrinsic value as a human being. And if you can make a difference to someone's life, carry them upwards where they're falling downwards, this is a very, very beneficial action, and it draws blessings from people who benefit from you. And so this is why the value of compassion comes into it. Because if a person is weak, they do something wrong, they're under stress, they have many, many things against them, and you can do something to set them back on their feet. That is so good.
And noble, I would say. Very noble.
You can forgive a person and show trust in them, and they can start to have trust in themselves as a result of how you treat them.
You go on in the next paragraph to talk about something called ethical fitness, which is a new term for most of us watching this program and reading this text. Wrestling with ethical dilemmas and arriving at sound moral choices demand ethical fitness. The development of such fitness is necessary in any curriculum of human values if our youth are to develop the clarity to perceive right versus wrong or distinguish right versus right. Tell us what you mean by the last 4 concepts.
When you have to do moral reasoning, you have to be able to look at, okay, what are all the things that need to be taken into consideration? You have to look at what caused the circumstance, especially an ethical dilemma, to come into being. You have to be able to evaluate, okay, 2 courses of action may be right, but which one is going to have the better outcome for the greatest number of people? So you're motivated by benefit of other people. And if a person is personally sensitive to these things and in their power, they will be able to, there's a price to be paid for doing great action. And so if you're in your power and you are enjoying the benefits of having done a lot of good karma, you can afford to do something which looks like you will not benefit in the immediate short term, but you can calculate, and you calculate over the long term.
I was also curious as to what you meant by your last paragraph. Cultivating universal core values as well as grappling with ethical dilemmas requires the introspective, empowering discipline of meditation to consolidate an individual's moral fiber. I want you to explain the terminology that you used as well as what you mean by the last sentence.
You see, we go back to the idea of conscience. Conscience is a very deep inner mechanism of the soul. And when you're introspective, you're really focused on your conscience and you're really listening to the inner voice of conscience, which is very sensitive to truth, very sensitive to the order of values. What is the highest priority? So it becomes intuitive and instinctive, you see. And when you are meditating and studying matters of spirituality, you're all the time thinking about these things. And so these are not just concepts, but they become realities. So you're not just calculating it on the basis of how does it look, but how it is. That's a big difference.
Yeah, and it's quite obvious. It requires a lot of alone time, me time, to be able to focus on yourself to that extent, and it requires a silent mind, somebody dedicated to themselves in order to arrive at these answers.
When you do meditation regularly and for a considerable period of time on a daily basis, that quiet time causes the important points to come into your consciousness and you become very aware of them. If you don't have that alone time, that silent time, you tend to miss them, and then you're operating like what we may call an ordinary person who doesn't meditate.
Okay, there are 3 themes that emerged as far as character development is concerned, and I would like you to take us through them. The first is moral reasoning. This has come up in previous discussions and in previous chapters, but you've mentioned this most strongly under character development. Could you tell us why it is so important and why you emphasize it so strongly as regards building oneself up to become a better person? Why is it so important?
The landscape, psychological, social landscape on which an issue arrives will trigger a lot of prejudices and preconceptions. And performing moral reasoning begins with clearing away those things so that your evaluation of the matter in question is completely free from those biases. Because where there's a bias, you will make a wrong decision or a bad decision, and you will perhaps only realize later. So this is the first thing. Then you look at the people who are a part of the matter in question, and you look at what is going to happen to them as a result of the different things that you may do. You also need to see, okay, what are the options? And the options may not be immediately obvious, so you have to really sit with it and consider it so that you can have the time for the different options to present themselves to your intellect. Then you look at your capacity for compassion, because something may be right, but it may be cruel. And
what do you mean by that? Could you give us an example?
A person may do something which may be a crime, and so if they have to pay for that crime in the usual way, the punishment being commensurate with the crime, but then you look at the mitigating circumstances, and if you only look at the crime and the punishment without the mitigating circumstances, your punishment may be sort of gratuitous hardship for that person and really not help the situation. So you have to be sensitive to many aspects of what is going on and try to see the widest, largest, big picture that you can, and then take a look at, over the long term, what will be the consequences of the different options, and then choose the one with the best outcome. This is moral reasoning.
So the next aspect that you took up is ethical fitness. It implies that the more you practice it, the more fit you become, the more stronger you become.
Exactly.
It is a method of character building, which is a very attractive state to be in.
It is, and it also means that you don't have to spend so much time trying to figure things out, because you're getting so adept at doing the right thing that it comes to you quickly. And that is a very, very good capacity to have. You're able to pick up the signs, you're able to tell very well, because of your competence, what would be the good thing to do. Something that's not obvious, you will detect it, and you will avoid falling into traps.
The last theme that I picked up from character development is your emphasis on introspection. I think that this forms the foundation of everything that you've said under character development, and I think if you do not have the ability to look inside, then it's kind of a question of all is lost. Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you tell us what your take is on it?
There are two words. One is introspection, to look within, and one is introversion, to be turned within. So one is you're really cultivating that eye that sees the inner landscape, because all situations occur on the external landscape and they're also reflected in the inner landscape, and when you can see both, you have a much better sense of what's happening. Introversion is something slightly different, that you're turned within, you're oriented to the inner, and you are, I think, when you're oriented to the inner, much more able to see what you look like on the outside than when you're turned to the outside. And when you're turned towards the inside, you are also able to detect the very subtle messages that conscience is going to keep informing you with as you deal with different situations. So to operate from this introspected state means that you're free from the external influences, because there are many who may wish to bias you one way or the other, or give you wrong information, or mislead you or deceive you. And with this, you are protecting yourself from negative external influences. So it's a very good thing to practice.
I am looking now at the aspects of our character that pull us down. I mentioned one's dark side before, your weaknesses, your vices, but I'm particularly in this chapter looking at the weakness of disheartenment. I see you smiling. You can answer the question. The one that I didn't ask, answer it.
No, when you raised this subject of disheartenment, I was also thinking about that.
Yeah.
Because you see, to do all this, for some people they'll say, oh, you know, this is outside my range, I can't do this. And so they won't even take the first step, because it's so big, and people can easily feel, you know, where do I begin? I'm so far along off track that I don't think I can come back to, this is too idealistic, you see?
Yeah, that is very much part of it, but also I'm trying to be such a good person. I'm working so hard on myself, and yet on a daily basis I'm facing my karmic accounts of my own weaknesses bringing me down and other people trying to bring me down. It's like you're facing gravity all the time, the force of gravity, and you have to fight the force of gravity all the time. And that can be very debilitating for the human spirit, especially if you're doing this alone, which many viewer and many reader are doing alone. You won't find hundreds joining you on this journey. You'll be lucky if you were, but say if you're doing this alone, what then?
Well, I think it's true, all of us are doing it alone, and you're finding yourself swimming upstream, and you've got to keep swimming, and you can get exhausted.
Yeah.
And just want to just take a rest, and if you do that, the stream is going to pull you back down again. So that also makes you feel a little disheartened. But I think that when you're doing a course like this, part of the beauty of it is that you're not alone, because there are going to be other people who are also doing this course. It's not just that we're doing this for only one person, there are many. And those who are doing the course tend to meet up with one another and encourage one another along the way. The other aspect that's very important is that if you are studying this course and you have a commitment to regular daily meditation, there is an accumulation of spiritual power, which is a kind of petrol that keeps the car of your life moving forward. It really is something that you just sense after a little while, that I must do my meditation, because if I don't do my meditation, I can feel a certain hunger, a certain weakness coming on. So you're really internally motivated to do that, and that in itself will help you to get across the moments where you just start feeling it's all too hard, it's all too much. And the second thing is that, of course, we have days where everything is more difficult, but there's another day tomorrow, and the sunshine comes up and you feel motivated so that you then, cover the ground that maybe got lost the previous day, and you get going again. And this is part of it.
So disheartenment is just another challenge in the journey of self-development.
Disheartenment, laziness, sadness, self-doubt. There's a lot of negative energies that come along, and these are the exams, these are the tests that you get. And so we need to identify them as tests, identify the self as a student, and when a student meets a test, then the activity is, let me pass the test. You don't look at the test and say, oh my goodness, why am I having a test? No, I'm having a test because I'm a student.
Okay. Thank you, Sister Denise. That was a very realistic approach to character development. What I liked about today's show is that Sister Denise didn't just paint a rosy picture of what it's like to be a good person. She painted a picture of the stepping stones that one should step on in order to get where you want to be as a spiritually empowered person. Sister Denise mentioned laziness and disheartenment and how to deal with them. So this is not a show where we're looking at life through rose-tinted glasses. This is a realistic method, a tried and tested method of how to develop yourself spiritually. So I thank you.
Thank you.
And I thank you for joining us for this half an hour, and I genuinely hope that I get to see you for the next episode. Take care and goodbye to you.